Klein from the Greater Miami Jewish Federation. Chag Sameach and Shabbat Shalom. Happy holidays and Shabbat Shalom to everyone. You know, we're going to read in synagogue tomorrow the book of Ecclesiastes, the book of Kohelet. And you probably know the song by the Byrds from the 1960s that everything turns, turns, turns. There's a season for everything under the sun. And while Ecclesiastes says, Ein chadash tachat hashemesh, there is nothing new under the sun, the rabbis have an ingenious statement. They say the following: yes, there is nothing new under the sun, but there are always things that are new above the sun, meaning that there is always growth spiritually. Perhaps we shouldn't see life like a circle, going back to the same place again and again, but rather look at life like a spiral. Yes, we arrive at the same points every year, and the seasons physically don't change, but we change, and we experience the seasons differently every year. Sukkot is the end of a cycle. It's the end of the three pilgrimage festival of Pesach, Shavuot, and now Sukkot. It marks indeed an end of sorts, but it also marks the beginning as well. Because as we celebrate the harvest in the ancient times in the land of Israel, it was also the beginning of the planting season, planting seeds for over the long winter to be harvested 6 months later over Passover. We look forward to the future. And also, spiritually, there's a beginning and an end. This is the holiday of Simchat Torah. Now, in the Torah itself, the day is simply called Shmini Atzeret, a festival of holiness. It has no specific rituals, but over the centuries, the rabbis gave this day an identity, and the day has become known as the completion of the reading of the Torah. And as we complete the reading of the Torah with Zot HaBracha, no sooner do we roll up the Torah scroll that we take another Torah scroll out, and what do? We begin reading Bereshit chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. We go right back to the beginning of the Torah all over again. However, unlike the planting season, which is year after year the same thing, we only seem to think that in the spiritual level we're repeating ourselves, but every year as we approach the Torah beginning again, it's new. Why? Because we change every year, and we experience the Torah new every year. We may not always be aware of that change, but one year we'll wake up and realize where we were a year ago and where we are now, and we experience the Torah anew every year. You know, we read the Haftarah after the Torah reading, and Rivka Alter, who's a Jewish educator in New York, in a recent essay, noted something that I never really thought about. The Babylonian Talmud lists many of the Haftarot that one is supposed to read with different Parshiot. Now, in general, the themes of the Haftarot are focused on a theme that's developed in the Parashah itself, unless we're in a specific time on the Jewish calendar, like the 3 weeks or the 7 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, where other themes are co-opting the themes of the Parashah. So the Haftarah that's almost universally accepted for Simchat Torah, interestingly, is the first chapter of the book of Joshua, the first chapter of the books of prophet. This is not the Haftarah that is mentioned in the Babylonian Talmud, and the change is associated with Rabbi Hai Gaon in the 10th century. But he brings no reason why basically the entire Jewish people don't accept the tradition of the Talmud and use this as the Haftarah on Simchat Torah, the first chapter of the book of Joshua. Now, you might argue that just like we begin the Torah again with the beginning of Bereshit, the beginning of Genesis, so it makes sense with the Haftarot that we're going to read the first chapter of the book of prophets as the beginning of the annual reading of Haftarot. However, we don't read the Haftarot as a cycle. We don't read anything from the beginning to the end with Haftarot, and we only read a small portion of the books of prophets for the Haftarah. So it's not a very convincing or very strong argument. However, perhaps if we actually look at the themes of the Haftarah in the first chapter of Yehoshua, they lend themselves to the reading of Zot HaBracha, of the end of the Torah. Think about this. Moses has just died in our Parashah. The leader after 40 years in the desert. People must have been at a total loss. It's the only teacher that they ever knew. Furthermore, the Torah at the very end tells us there was never a prophet like Moses who spoke to God face to face. There will never be another prophet like Moses. Moses was sui generis. He was unto himself. Moses actually feared that the people would lose hope in time. And on multiple occasions at the end of the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, he props up of Joshua, the one that has been his right-hand man for many years. In front of the people, he charges Joshua, Chazak ve'ematz, be of strong courage. The Torah never really considers seriously Joshua's reaction. Was Joshua really confident? If Moses did not succeed with the Jewish people, and he knew that in the future they were going to sin, how would Joshua possibly succeed with this stiff-necked people now going into the land of Israel? The Gemara in Bava Batra 75a compares the face of Moses to the face of Joshua. Moses is compared to the sun, and Joshua was the moon. Now this midrash is supposed to explain the fact that Joshua was the faithful servant. The source of life is Moses, the sun. And who is Joshua, the faithful servant who reflects the light of the sun, who reflects the Torah of his master? However, let's look at this on a deeper level. Perhaps this midrash is exploring the psychology of Joshua. Joshua saw himself as a moon, a pale and only partial reflection of his master. Joshua is now charged to carry on and move on, to bring the people forward into the land of Israel, something Moses never did and was not able to do. Did Joshua feel ready? There are indications in the first chapter that he was not. Because why does God begin with the book of Joshua to encourage Joshua with the same words that Moses used to encourage him? He says, Chazak ve'ematz again. He says, be faithful in a strong courage. He doesn't ask Joshua to be a new Moses, but only that he be faithful to the vision of Moses. What does God tell him? God tells Joshua the following: let not this book of the Torah cease from your lips, Joshua, but recite the Torah day and night, so that you may observe faithfully all that is written in the Torah. Only then will you prosper in your undertakings, and only then will you be successful. I charge you, Joshua, be strong and resolute. Do not be terrified or dismayed, because the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Perhaps this is God encouraging Joshua, helping him overcome his doubts. Every generation will have challenges, but you, Joshua, God is saying, you are the right person for this new generation. Now you go forth. You carry forth for the Torah, the vision of your master Moses. I think that that's a beautiful idea, and I think we can expand this to all of us. The charge in the Haftarah is a charge to Joshua, but maybe we can look at this as a charge to each one of us. We said that Joshua is like the moon, but there's another thing that's compared to the moon throughout the literature of the rabbis. The Jewish people themselves are considered like the moon. Like the moon, which waxes and wanes, the Jewish people are dynamic. They rise and fall. They struggle to become who they really are. The sun is constant and eternal, almost not of this world. Most of us are not becoming Moses. However, perhaps each one of us, just like Joshua, are charged to be a Joshua, to carry on the vision of the past to the best of our ability. So we conclude the Torah, and we repeat the teaching again and again, beginning with Bereshit. We tried to remain faithful to the vision of our forefathers and foremothers. However, we are not spectators to their religion. We commit ourselves, just like Joshua, to carry it with us and to take responsibility for the Torah. We are like Joshua, carrying the Torah into the land of Israel. This year, we need as a community to commit to study Torah in a class, online with a partner. Think about how many opportunities there are to deepen your own Jewish identity. There are so many with the Melton program and our federation. Judaism is not a spectator sport. Each of us are charged to carry the Torah with us. God is not just telling Joshua, God is telling each one of us, Chazak ve'amatz, be strong and of good courage. As we grow and study and reflect, the Torah that we carry and repeat will have an impact on the world. We indeed will come back to this place next year, but we will be at the same place, but we'll spiral higher and higher. In conclusion, I'd like to share a teaching of Rabbi Soloveitchik, Rabbi Joseph B. Soloveitchik. You know, during the holiday of Sukkot, every day there's a prayer called the Hashonot, where Jews take the lulav and etrog and they circle around the bima. And in the middle of the bima is a Torah. Every day they do this. And of course, that shows that the center of our lives is Torah. And therefore, we are enthroning the Torah as a sense. We are encircling it. However, as you know, we also go in circles 7 times, in fact, on Simchat Torah, on the Hakafot. Now, where is the Torah here? The Torahs are in our hands. We are going around and around in a circle. What's in the middle of that circle? Rabbi Soloveitchik says, it's not nothing. It's not nothing in the middle of the circle. Rather, God, as it were, is in the middle of the circle. We are taking the Torah and we are encircling God. In parading the Torah around this divine circle, we are saying that we take responsibility to carry on the divine vision throughout history. God entrusts each one of us to be a Joshua, to live up to the Torah's values. So thus I conclude, as we conclude the Torah with the same bracha that God gave Joshua in the first chapter, Chazak ve'amatz, be strong and of good courage. Shabbat Shalom.